Long live China. Long live Xi Jinping. Big up to Mao Zedong, nigga.
Is Gen Z unhinged? Yes. Is Gen Z also kind of hilarious? Also yes. Gen Z is losing its mind over the looming TikTok ban and protesting the ban in the most unhinged and unintentionally hilarious way imaginable. We're going to break this down and so much more in today's episode of the Bread vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where I take on the craziest ideas from across our politics, the internet, and our media, all from an independent perspective. Quick heads up, guys, there probably will not be a show tomorrow, Wednesday, as I'll be traveling for an event I'm doing that I will share with you guys eventually, but not yet. Okay. So our first topic we've got to discuss, with the threat of TikTok officially being banned looming in just a few days pending a Supreme Court decision, Gen Zers in particular are freaking out online and they're protesting the pending ban in a way where you gotta give them points for creativity. They're flocking instead to a literally Chinese-owned app because TikTok is an American company whose parent company is an international corporation owned in part by Chinese investors and has obviously is subject to the Chinese government, but it's not literally a Chinese company. TikTok doesn't operate in China. So to protest, users of TikTok are flocking to an app they've found called Red Note, or Little Red Book in Chinese, that is literally a Chinese app available in China and used as sort of like an Instagram, TikTok hybrid by Chinese people. As Wired reports, with a TikTok ban looming, users are fleeing to Chinese app Red Note. Some say they joined Zhanghao Shu, which translates to Little Red Book, to spite the US government after a ban on TikTok became more likely. As of Monday, Red Note was the #1 most downloaded app in Apple's US App Store, despite the fact that it doesn't even have an official English name. Think about this for a second with me, guys. The government told Gen Z and told TikTok users, we're banning this app because it's a hypothetical national security risk due to data privacy. I've spoken out. You guys know my views on this. I'm against the ban. I don't find this persuasive. But Gen Z's mad about this. They're fuming over this ban, and to some extent I understand why. And they said, oh, you're worried about China getting our data? We'll give China our data. And they went and signed up for a literal Chinese-controlled app and put all their data in. The memes that they've been sharing are honestly really funny, like this one. It does raise an interesting question, though. Like, who owns your data? If I own my own data, then surely it should be up to me whether I trust a Chinese-owned company with my data, not the government coming in and being all nanny state and paternalistic and protecting me from my own decisions. But anyway, as for Red Note, this new app, I'll play you a little compilation of videos where TikTokers explain their interest in and rationale for switching to the app, even though it's almost exclusively in Mandarin, and presumably they won't actually be able to use it in any real sense.
Because what do you mean you're going to ban an app because it could possibly be manipulated by a foreign adversary, the CCP, just for your citizens to turn around and download an app that is directly owned and operated by the CCP? That is just so funny to me. What's even funnier, not even 3 scrolls in and I was already getting a Mandarin lesson in English. They're already teaching us Chinese.
Giving up my data, bitch. I'm about to give that shit straight to Xi Jinping in a red envelope. Long live China. Long live Xi Jinping. Big up to Mao Zedong, nigga.
Bill, that bans an app just to have the United States population mass migrate to the Chinese version of TikTok. 他们在光会，我会给中国他们想要的人东西。
If anyone asks you why you switched to Red Note, tell them that since the United States is using our government and our laws in order to censor us and destroy our small businesses and our community under the guise of preventing Chinese interference with our data, that we have turned to Red Note, to Zhaohongzhu, literally translated to the Little Red Book, for guidance and support and community.
So I do have to admit, when I saw this trend happening online, when I saw these videos, I was gagged. Like, this is actually hilarious. If you set aside the morality of it, the prudence and wisdom of it, it's so funny that Gen Z literally found an app that's actually controlled by the CCP and all went en masse and gave it their data and downloaded it on their phone on purpose. You gotta give them points for creativity and humor. But this is getting unhinged, frankly. And I mean, the last influencer I showed there holding up Mao's Little Red Book that this app is apparently named after. We'll get into that in a minute, but that's actually evil and disturbing. You might as well be holding up Hitler's Mein Kampf, really. Now, some far-left journalists joined in on this craze, like Taylor Lorenz, who posted on Blue Sky, "Follow me on Red Note, the hottest new social app in America." Then she put Chinese characters up in a follow-up tweet that translate to "Long live China." Trolling is one thing, okay? And I can take a joke, I can see the humorous side of it, but a disturbing number of these young people actually do seem to think that, like, America is terrible, and America has its problems and its flaws, and I criticize our government all the time, and that China is, like, somehow good. No, actually, China is a totalitarian state that brutally oppresses its own people in ways that Americans would find unimaginable. And being upset with our government over this decision is fine, but don't fool yourself for a second that China is somehow doing things better or the right way. It is funny to have seen kind of a woke civil war break out over this Red Note switcheroo that they're encouraging because, shocker, the Chinese Communist Party controlled app is not super LGBTQ plus IA Wi-Fi password community friendly, nor is it very sex positive or pro-women. Who could have seen that one coming? Only people with the most moderate amount of knowledge or education about the reality of China today, but that's too much for most of these TikTok people. So, for example, one person replied to Taylor Lorenz and wrote, "Given my limited research into it, I'll give it a miss for now about Red Note. Doesn't appear to be LGBTQ plus friendly, and that doesn't vibe with me." And this person linked an article by The Advocate, a woke gay news website, that says, "What is Red Note? The TikTok alternative that doesn't allow showing skin or LGBTQ plus content. With heavy censorship of bodies and LGBTQ plus topics, Red Note might not be everything TikTok refugees are seeking." You don't say. Obviously, if your point was just to troll the US government, I mean, mission accomplished. But if you actually thought that this app that's literally controlled by China was going to be some sort of safe haven for the progressive gobbledygook that is so popular on TikTok, you're insane. This funny account I follow on Twitter shared news reporting. What content is allowed on Red Note? TikTok refugees. They're referring to themselves as refugees, guys. That's a bit much for me. TikTok refugees have already noted harsh restrictions on Red Note that have resulted in their content being removed or their accounts being suspended, including for mentioning LGBTQ plus identities or for women wearing a slightly low-cut top. Daniel posted this on Twitter and wrote, "Okay, it turns out the Little Red Book app run by the Chinese Communist Party is not a sex-positive space for BIPOC queer folks." Sad face emoji. Again, who could have possibly seen this one coming? So a couple serious points to make about this story, about this revelation that Gen Z and TikTok people are switching over to this Red Book app, this Red Note app, and so much so that it's not just something they're posting about. People are doing it because it went to the #1 most downloaded app on the Apple App Store. I will say this is a new level of pettiness and unseriousness from Gen Z that part of me can appreciate, doing it for the plot, and can laugh at stuff like this. But on the other hand, it is incredibly stupid in too many ways to count. First and foremost, the law that they passed that will allow the government to ban TikTok will absolutely let them ban this too. If anything, that law applies much more clear-cut and explicitly to Red Note than it does arguably to TikTok. So as soon as the US government catches wind of this, or if it catches on to any great extent, they'll easily be able to ban this one too. And then there's a piece of this story that I can't laugh at because it does remind me of the kind of profound historical illiteracy and kind of naivete of many of these Gen Zers, that they seem to either be unaware, and I'm gonna go with unaware because I can't imagine they actually know this and they're cool with it or support it. That's just too evil. Unaware about the dark history of communism in China, in the Soviet Union, and everywhere else that it's been tried. Because remember, this app is named after Chairman Mao's Little Red Book. And Chairman Mao's Great Leap Forward was responsible for the deaths of 45 million people. That's right, guys. 45 million were starved, shot, tortured, or worked to death under his so-called Great Leap Forward and its ramifications and policy fallouts in the years to come. That is a record worse than Hitler. Not exaggerating here. And people are flocking to this app, even posing with the Little Red Book and being like, haha, so funny, we're all communists now. Think about it. Would they ever do that with Mein Kampf? With something that's openly named after Hitler? Of course not, because they'd realize how horrible and evil that is. But when it comes to communism, there's just this lack of that same energy, of that same education, that same awareness from young people these days. And that's why I think they're drawn to so many deeply misguided and false and empty promises and worldviews, because they don't understand the history of how some of this stuff has played out in the past. And that, to me, is really concerning. So yeah, on one hand, am I laughing at this trend? Do I find it kind of hilarious? Yes, I do. And I'm not going to feel bad about that. And I do feel some sympathy for them about TikTok being banned. I don't support that. But on the other hand, can I see how truly unhinged this is and how much of a moral blind spot young people must have to actually be hopping on board a pro-communism app that's inspired by one of the evilest people in history? Yeah. I also think that's unhinged and terrible. But what do you guys think of all this? I'm genuinely curious to hear all of your thoughts in the comments below. I do take the time to read the comments, so definitely do let me know what you think. And do hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. And now, we got to check in on MSNBC because journalist Joy Reid just crashed out on live television in one of the most unhinged rants I've ever seen. Take a listen to what she said about, and the context is her railing against billionaires and Republicans, spreading what she calls misinformation and criticizing California during the wildfires. Take a listen to what she said, and then we'll meet back here and discuss, because, oh boy, there's a lot to unpack.
Worst part, other than the fires themselves, has been the lies. Though if there is one thing the billionaire right is, they are consistent. They want California, America's biggest state economy, because if they can take California and retrofit it with their ugly right-wing policies, the way they've ruined Florida and Texas and every other red state, where poverty rates are high and education is warped and non-white immigrants, pregnant women, victimized girls, and LGBTQ folks live in fear, then the fight for permanent control of America is basically over. They can drill and frack California till the fires this past week pale in comparison. They can rip out all the forests and hand over the land to developers, Florida style. They can drive out the brown people and the black and Asian people, or just sink them into the same apartheid they've created in Texas. And they will control enough electoral votes if they control California to never have to worry about another presidential election. The billionaire right knows that they cannot take California, home to Hollywood, San Francisco, and Kendrick Lamar, by culture. So they're looking to try to take it with lies and deceit and by fire.
I mean, wow. Is she okay? Like, I get that there's a wide range of political opinion in this country, and that some people have really far left views. Some people really hate Republicans, really hate Republican policies, but that's a level of hysteria I don't know that I've encountered since my college days at one of the most far left woke universities in America. Really, I mean, geez Louise, Joy, put down the crack pipe. You've had enough. She actually just claimed that Republicans and red policies have ruined Florida and Texas. In reality, people are flocking to these states. They're seeing a huge net positive in population growth because these economically friendly and low cost of living places are attractive to people. Most people don't think they've been ruined, which I don't know how anyone could truly argue that. You could disagree with some of their policies, sure, but they haven't been ruined. What? And they're both middle of the pack when it comes to poverty rates. They both have significantly lower poverty rates than DC, for example. But I doubt that Joy would acknowledge that blue policies have destroyed Washington, D.C., would she? And I don't know what she's yapping off about LGBTQ plus folks living in fear in Florida and Texas. That just not true. Lots of gay people and even trans adults go about and live their lives in peace and in happiness in those states every single day. Might you disagree with some of their policies around those issues? Has the culture war gotten heated and toxic about some of those issues? Absolutely, yes. And I've criticized some of the policies and some of the things going on in those states at times, but to pretend that they're somehow like unsafe for people or that there's still not millions of LGBT people just living and thriving in those states is delirious. It's delulu beyond belief. And what is this weird rant about fracking? Fracking doesn't cause wildfires. Huh? Fine. Let me know next time Pennsylvania, the home of fracking in America, has wildfires consume the state. Like we can have a debate about fracking, but it has nothing to do with wildfires in California. Even if you're going the climate change route, fracking has helped us reduce carbon emissions as part of the shift towards natural gas and away from coal. Like everything she's saying just has no basis in reality. I mean, she claimed that Texas and Florida are driving out black and brown people. What are you talking about? Both of these states are incredibly racially diverse and only becoming more so, not less. In both Florida and Texas, you have people living under Republican policies of all different races and backgrounds. And she somehow suggested Texas is apartheid? Like, what? Guys, that refers to a system of open segregation like you had back in the day in the US or previously in South Africa. And if you ask me, that's kind of actually profoundly insulting to the people who suffered under those brutal and oppressive and deeply evil regimes to compare modern day Texas to that. I mean, what? That's just not true. People have equal rights in Texas and Florida, regardless of their race. I don't even understand the point of this rant. She's talking about billionaires trying to take California. And first off, that's not going to happen. That's not a thing. California's not going to go red, not anytime soon. But also, billionaires can't take a state. They would have to convince the people to start supporting Republicans. That's the only way you take a state in our system is by convincing people. So that's not taking at all. That's convincing. So she's framing this nefarious plot of billionaires to woo California away from the Democrats without thinking even for a second like, how badly must have Democrats have done in mismanaging the state if that were to happen? It couldn't possibly be their fault. No, all these people must just be brainwashed by Elon Musk or something. There's no accountability. There's no self-reflection. There's no remote propensity for thinking that maybe you've done anything wrong. No, it just must be everyone else having fallen victim to propaganda or something. It's impressive in the levels of self-confidence to the point of absolute arrogance. And I do resent the jibe there at the end about billionaires and Republicans taking California by fire. They didn't cause the fire. If anyone is responsible for the fire, which to some extent is just part of Mother Nature, it is the governmental policies that failed to mitigate it. For sure, a newsflash cupcake, none of those were put in place by Republicans. The California government at all levels is dominated by progressive Democrats. So if you want to blame anybody for the state's fires, you can't blame Republicans. I'm not sure the blame game is something we need to immediately hop into in the aftermath of a tragedy, but to the extent we are going to talk about policies that played a role in failing to mitigate this natural disaster, It is not Republicans responsible for those policies in any way, shape, or form when we're talking about California. Guys, this woman, Joy Reid, gets paid millions of dollars a year, millions, for this level of political analysis. That is jaw-dropping, astounding, and frankly, a microcosm for everything that's wrong with mainstream media and why their viewership and credibility continues to plummet. So what do you guys think? How impressed and convinced were you by Miss Joy Reid's little rant here? Do let me know in the comments, and do hit that like button while you're at it. And now we got to talk about some right-wing influencers, primarily Russell Brand and Candace Owens, who are, for some bizarre reason, deciding to defend the indefensible, aka Andrew Tate. The backstory for this segment that you need to understand is that the MAGA influencer Benny Johnson recently hosted Andrew Tate for an interview. Andrew Tate being this internet superstar who's like an alpha male, who, as he describes himself, but is in truth incredibly toxic, incredibly misogynistic, incredibly anti-Semitic for sure. He just tweets calling people Jews randomly all the time. He's a really controversial person with a very sordid past. He's on camera repeatedly talking about how he pimped out women, about how he hits and abuses women physically. It's all in his own words on tape. He's been recording himself and posting it on the internet for years, making stunning admissions of his own wrongdoing. And yet, Benny Johnson and one of Trump's top lawyers had an interview with Tate where they basically gave him a 45-minute tongue bath. There was no scrutiny, tough questions. This wasn't journalism. This was just promotion. This was just simping for him, just being basically fangirling over him. And they've come in for a lot of criticism over that. In fact, it's been kind of heartening to see many people on the right, from Ben Shapiro to many others, criticizing them for doing this and criticizing Andrew Tate and pointing out that a self-professed pimp, pornographer, and abuser of women is not, in fact, a champion in line with conservative values in any real sense. But some influencers on the kind of new online right have decided to defend Tate in ways that I don't understand why they're doing it and make very little sense. For example, here is the actor turned political commentator Russell Brand, who isn't like a traditional right-winger. His ideas and politics are kind of all over the place, but at least his home these days is sort of on the new online right. Take a listen to his defense of Andrew Tate.
Someone like Andrew Tate, with the audience he has, could make a significant difference if correctly backed. He does say some stuff that's pretty out there, but the fact is, in a democracy, if someone is able to glean popular support, they can have a mandate, they should be represented. I suppose what's more significant and interesting to me is the way that figures like Andrew Tate or Tommy Robinson have always been maligned, I think, to place an impassable threshold around systems of influence and power. You can have your own views of Andrew Tate. You might think he's misogynistic or vulgar, but the fact is he appeals to a lot of people and he represents some things that a lot of people are very interested in.
Yeah, so that did not make a lot of sense. First, Russell seems to describe Tate as if the controversy surrounding him is just things he said, just controversial ideas he has or hot takes he's put out there in the world, but it's about a lot more than that. We're not just talking about tweets that hurt people's feelings, although, him just calling people Jews and slurs all the time on Twitter is not admirable behavior. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the fact that he is very seriously, with ample evidence, including voice notes and text messages where he basically admits to doing it, accused of strangling women, accused of violating them physically and sexually, all without their consent. We're talking about the fact that he is a self-professed pimp and pornographer who, on video after video after video, talks about harming women. This is about his actions and his history and who he is as a person and what image he presents to the world. It's not about him having offensive takes. That's just a complete misconstrual of what the backlash is about here. And I don't actually think that Andrew Tate speaks for a lot of people. He had a moment a couple years ago, but I'm going to put the Google Trends chart on the screen here. His moment passed interest in him is largely over, except apparently from right-wing influencers who think they can still use him to get some clicks or some attention or kick off controversy, which it does work to that extent. But the idea that he's some sort of guru or speaking for millions of people at this point seems to me to no longer be true. And I don't think the reason that he's getting so much backlash and people are trying to marginalize him from the mainstream right isn't because he's a threat to power or that he threatens powerful institutions and that's why he's being canceled. Lots of people threaten establishment institutions but aren't getting this pushback. It's because he harms women and boasts about it online, and people are bothered by that, especially many conservatives who say they believe in family values and traditional masculinity and all this stuff that is so at odds with this interesting figure here in Andrew Tate. And I just have to say, Russell Brand has faced criminal investigation and allegations of sexual misconduct. And I said, like I say with everybody, that he deserves due process and he shouldn't be assumed to be guilty. But it is not a great look when you are immediately hopping to the defense or to make excuses for somebody who we know has harmed women. In his own words, he's admitted it many times. That's not a great look if you've also been accused of wrongdoing, in that it doesn't paint you in the best light in terms of your own innocence. Still, he deserves a fair treatment, a fair process, like everyone does, but it's not a good look, my dude. Now, Russell Brand was not the only one who hopped on the train to defend Andrew Tate after all this belated criticism. Candace Owens, the popular YouTuber and podcaster, also chimed in defense of Benny Johnson's tongue bath for Andrew Tate. Here's what she had to say. The people who have made their careers purporting to care about the free market of ideas and speech are now all telling Benny Johnson that he shouldn't speak to Andrew Tate. Take note, conservatives. Yeah, the point went over her head on this one. Very few people were telling Benny Johnson that he shouldn't speak to Andrew Tate. Basically, none of us on the right were criticizing, for example, Piers Morgan when he interviewed Tate and grilled him on his beliefs, on his radical views, on his past comments, on the allegations against him. No, what we're saying is that if you are a self-professed Christian conservative family man like Benny Johnson, that you should not uncritically promote and cheerlead for and fangirl for a self-avowed pimp, pornographer, and credibly accused with lots of evidence harmer of women. That's not the same thing as saying no open debate, no free speech, cancel him. We're not calling for him to be censored. We're not calling for him to be taken off X. We're not calling for Benny Johnson to be banned either. We're saying that very influential right-wing figures shouldn't use their platform to uncritically promote terrible people who've done terrible things and promote terrible messages. That's not anti-free speech. That's about discernment. It's about gatekeeping your own movement and not letting crazy people infiltrate it. What's so strange about this to me is Candace Owens is the first one to talk about how she thinks porn is the worst thing ever for society. She goes, very overstates the case for me, although I certainly think porn can be harmful, but she's so anti-porn, yet also cheerleads for and promotes Andrew Tate. She's had him on her show for softball interviews. She's championing him here. And it's like, you know, he made all his money in porn, right? In manipulating and allegedly coercing women into doing porn for him. That's your man? That's the person you're going to die on the hill defending? The math is not mathing for me from Russell or from Candace here at all. But I think to some extent, they both have kind of fallen into this trap of anti-establishmentarianism where the establishment gets a lot of things wrong and deserves to be criticized for a lot of things, but it's not always wrong. And when you decide to become kind of such an anti-establishment person that you just reflexively defend anyone the establishment doesn't like, anything the establishment says is wrong, you also end up in some very strange places and not actually getting closer to moral or factual truth. At least that's my take. But what do you guys think? Do any of you disagree with me? Do any of you agree with Candace and Russell? I do want to hear you out. I will read the comments and check out your pushback. As long as we keep it respectful and thoughtful, always open to different opinions around here. And we'll leave it there for today. Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Do hit that like button before you go. And we'll talk again on Thursday.